Hi, it's Karen here. Welcome to another day in our 24 days of tags for 2020. Here I'm using one of my favourite techniques of all time, which is Brushos on a gel plate. I'm using all Lavinia stamps today. I've got the Pheasant. I'm using Spanish Moss, which is a fabulous stamp that you can use either hanging down to get a really lovely drapey look, or the way that I've used it here is a bit of ferny, grassy feel to it. So I'm going to use the gel plate that's 3.5 inches by 7 inches, and I'm going to use the whole piece, and then I'm going to cut the tag from the pieces that I like the best. For my background, I'm going to use one of the fabulous new dye ink pads from Lavinia called Paprika. They are really juicy pads. So I'm going to apply the ink with my brayer. I'm using a speedball brayer. I love this because it's soft and it works really well on the gel plate. So I'm going to ink up my brayer, but as I said, they are so juicy, these pads. That's going to be enough for me. And I'm just going to apply it onto my gel plate, making sure that I've got a nice coverage going in both directions so that I've got it as relatively smooth as possible. I'm just going to remove all the excess ink off my brayer so that it's ready for the next time. I keep two brayers. I keep one which I apply my inks with, and then I have a separate one where I apply my paints. So here we go. What I've done is I've taken my Brushos, those gorgeous little highly pigmented pots of watercolour paint, and I've watered them down. The colours that I've got here, I've got purple, I've got sunburst lemon, yellow, any of those will do, and I've got white. So I just keep them in these tiny little pots here. I keep them watered down so that, and the lids are relatively airtight so that I don't have to keep watering them down every single time. So I'm going to take my fan brush here, and the first that I'm going to use is my yellow. And I'm just going to tap this all over my gel plate. Now, you might say, how much do I put on? That's going to depend on how watery you want it, how smushed, the kind of smushed effect that you want. Because if you notice here, I hope you're picking it up, here it's a really lovely smushed effect. Here I've got bits of almost blobs, splatters, splodges, whatever word we want to use, which haven't quite smushed all together. I like a combination of both. So the more Brushos you apply, the more smushing you're going to get. I'm sure there must be technical terms for these, but here you go. So there we are. That's my yellow. And now I'm going to apply a bit of purple. I kept that yellow predominantly, although not entirely, to the centre of the gel plate. And now I'm going to apply my purple around the edge. This gel plate is slightly larger than the tag size that I'm going to use, but that's okay. That means I can pick the best bits. Now, not to worry if you land up with some large splotches in the middle. That's okay. They will smush beautifully. So there we go. We don't want to drown it completely. Just in between the colours, I am cleaning off my paintbrush and wiping it on my towel, which is on my lap. Now, this white doesn't quite look that white, does it? But it will, because it looks a bit contaminated. So by applying the white, that's what's going to give me this sort of ethereal, orby type of look. So I kept my yellow to the centre, my purple around the edge, but my white I am splattering all over. Oh. Yeah, there's one downside to having your brushes permanently mixed up, and that's because after a while they tend to get a bit gloopy. So I shall probably, at the end of this session, I shall probably wipe them clean. So there you have what you want it to look like. As you can see, I've got some paper around my gel plate because when you're tapping the brushes, they tend to fly everywhere. So I'm going to take my card and I'm going to have a larger piece only because it's easier and I didn't cut it. Now, I have applied quite a lot of brushes on here, so we're going to get quite a smushed effect. Just check that out. No two will ever be the same. So whilst that looks a little darker than that one, once it dries, it will soften a little. Obviously on this one, I put more white. So we'll see what that looks like once it's dry. In the meanwhile, I'm going to have another go because honestly, you can't just stop at one. I just play like this for a couple of hours at a time. All sorts of different colours for my backgrounds. Just check what I've done. This one is using graphite in the same element series. Graphite for the background, and look at that, I just love it. You might see me use that for another tag later on in our series. And then again, using the same technique, isn't that fun? I just concentrated the brushes to the center of that piece of card. Then something very pink. Again, I used graphite for the background here. And of course, one of my favourite colours, blue. I didn't use too much white in that one. It was mostly yellows and oranges. So there we have a little play, have some fun. I'll come back to you when my first piece is dry. So here we are, it's all lovely and dried. And what I did was I cut the size of the tag. It's 6.5 centimetres by 12.5. And then I just snipped the corners. And I used, as I said, the best pieces of my print. So the first thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to stamp my pheasant. Now, because I don't usually use a stamp press, but because he is a pretty solid image there, I don't want any mistakes. So I'm going to use my stamping platform and I'm just going to ink up my pheasant using Nocturne, VersaFine Clear Nocturne, because that gives me a nice crisp image. It takes the detail really well. So I'm just going to let all parts of that stamp touch the card, and I'm just going to very gently lift it up. I'm just going to make sure that it doesn't move at all because I don't want it to. Now, the reason I'm being extra careful here about it not moving is because the brushos on the paper make the surface of that paper a little more rough than it would normally be. And that's another reason why I'm using the stamp press here. There we go. And now we've got a really lovely, crisp pheasant on our background. I'm now going to stamp my Spanish moss, and as I said, it comes with 2 stamps in the set, and this is how I keep my stamps. I've got these tabbed sheets, they're white, they come in an A4 size. I cut them into quarters, and using one of those permanent Sharpie markers, I label what my stamp is called and I store them in a box. all neatly like that. So again, I'm just going to ink up my Spanish moss, and I'm going to just stamp now. Do you know when a post or something is coming out the ground, don't the weeds and the flowers, they tend to sort of grow around the post? So that's why I would be making sure that they're really close to the post. You can see that I'm alternating the height of these various flowers, weeds, what have you. And now I'm going to go in with a couple of second generation ones, just to give it a bit of extra dimension there. There we go. And then I'm going to pick up my winter berry wreath set, and again ink that up. And come in from the top. And just put a tiny extra bit in there. There we go. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to heat it, because I am going to apply some white pigment ink around the edge, and I don't want this black to smudge. I'm now going to take my pigment ink. Now this is one of the best whites that I've found. I searched for a long time. I just love it. It's the unicorn one, it's the pigment ink. There's a couple of different types, but that's my favourite. And now what I'm going to do is just take a piece of cut and dry and gently go around the edge to give me this sort of misty, hazy look. It's far better to go in gently. It's far more difficult to take it off if you put it on too harshly. And as I say, we just want a hint of it to give us this sort of ethereal look. Each time you do this, you're going to end up with different colours. So no two will ever be the same. So also by doing this on the edge, you just land up with a bit more interest. I'm bending my cut and dry like this because then I'm not going to, it's less likely, I'm not going to say I'm not going to, but it's less likely that you'll get any of the edge visible. So I'm just doing tap tap, lightly, lightly. There we go. It just brings it in and gives it a bit of something soft. And then finally, the last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use my Liquid Pearls White Opal. And I always do a little dab on the side off so that I can get a feel for how much pressure I need to apply, i.e. how much liquid pearls is left in my bottle. And by adding this extra pop of white, it does just bring the whole thing a bit more alive. And there we have it, our tag for today. Now, once all of those are dry, I will punch my hole in the top. So I do hope you'll have a go. I hope you've enjoyed it. And thanks for watching. I'll see you again tomorrow. Bye.